If it's Wednesday, a rare and fiery rebuke of his own supporters. President Trump slams parts of his base for demanding more disclosures around Jeffery Epstein, blaming them and Democrats for the conspiracy theories that he and his own administration officials had spread. Plus, President Trump is fed up with his Fed chair, but tells reporters he's unlikely to fire Jerome Powell, despite a senior White House official confirming the president privately told lawmakers the exact opposite just yesterday. And the administration's full court press to focus attention back on their so-called big, beautiful bill, as Vice President Vance hits Pennsylvania to tout the new law, following the president's swing through the battleground yesterday. Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Gabe Gutierrez in Washington, where President Trump is lashing out at his own supporters as GOP lawmakers and MAGA influencers ramp up pressure on his administration to disclose more information about Jeffrey Epstein in the wake of a Justice Department decision not to release any more files tied to the convicted sex offender. The chorus of conservatives calling for more transparency has now grown to include the Speaker of the House and other reliable Trump allies. The president this morning on social media scolding his followers, saying, quote, "My past supporters have bought into this BS, hook, line, and sinker." He also tried to baselessly pin the Epstein conspiracy theories, that he and his team had amplified on Democrats and former FBI Director James Comey. The president then doubled down on his frustrations with his own supporters as he took questions from reporters in the Oval Office.
It's all been a big hoax. It's perpetrated by the Democrats, and some stupid Republicans and foolish Republicans fall into the net, and so they try and do the Democrats' work. The Democrats are good for nothing other than these hoaxes. He's dead. He's gone. And all it is the Republicans, certain Republicans got duped by the Democrats, and they're following a Democrat playbook. I lost a lot of faith in certain people. Yeah, I lost because they got duped by the Democrats. The Democrats are good for nothing.
We should note Epstein was charged, arrested, imprisoned, and died by suicide while awaiting trial, all during Trump's first term, and all after James Comey was fired. The president defended his attorney general's handling of the Epstein fallout while also giving her the green light to release more information.
Will you ask Attorney General Pam Bondi to release more documents to finally put this controversy to bed?
Yeah, whatever's credible, she can release. If a document is credible, if a document's there that is credible, she can release. I think it's good. Pam Bondi, I really think that she's done very good. She says, I gave you all the credible information. And if she finds any more credible information, she'll give that too. What more can she do than that? I mean, honestly, what more can she do?
As we noted, the conspiracy theory-fueled headache that the White House is now dealing with comes as top congressional Republicans are calling for more files to be released.
It's a very delicate subject, but we should put everything out there and let the people decide it. I mean, the White House and the White House team are privy to facts that I don't know. I mean, this isn't my lane. I haven't been involved in that. But I agree with the sentiment that we need to put it out there.
Speaker Johnson is now claiming he has been misquoted or misrepresented in that interview, and that he and the president are on the same page. Meanwhile, Democrats are trying to seize on the growing MAGA rift, seeing it as an opportunity to paint Trump and Republicans as untrustworthy.
Option one, they lied for years. Option two, they're engaging in a cover-up. At this point, it seems reasonable that can only be one of the two things.
This is a case of the powerful protecting the powerful. We need to have those files released.
They're the same rich and well-connected elites that they're protecting by keeping the Epstein files under lock and key after campaigning to release them.
And joining me now from the White House is Kelly O'Donnell, our Chief Justice and National Affairs correspondent, and also with us our Chief Capitol Hill correspondent, Ryan Nobles. Kelly, I want to start with you. The president is tackling the blowback over the Epstein files in typical Trumpian fashion, but this time it's his followers who are the target. Is there any concern that this could backfire?
Well, the big question would be, what does he stand to lose? And he's not going to be on the ballot again. Could it affect his Republican colleagues in the midterms? We'll see. But certainly there has been what appears to be a breach in what has been a remarkably enduring relationship between candidate and President Trump with his followers that have gone with him when he has taken other steps that they didn't necessarily like. But in this case, they really had strong feelings in a broad way. We have seen that from the office holder to the voter to the conservative influencer saying they want more. And the president choosing to lash out and sort of distance himself from his own followers. That is striking. It is different. We have not seen that before. And how enduring it will be is another question. Will he kind of mend that in the days to come?
Yeah, and Kelly, could there be any real political consequences to ticking off his base, essentially?
Well, that is going to be a test because he would not be on the midterm ballot. And typically when Trump is on the ballot, that's when his broadest, most fervent voters turn out. So is there a cost there? In the short run, there does seem to be a sense of disillusionment among some in his base who voiced that they expected that he would somehow be different, that he would make a promise and keep a promise. The administration will quickly point out many areas where on policy they have done that. And the president's frustrations come through, where he's pointed out that Epstein is now deceased. The case is over, in his view, and that it is old news, in effect. But the president has used the tactics he has often harnessed against his adversaries. And the unique thing today is sort of directing them at his own followers and supporters.
And Kelly, I know you were at the Attorney General's press conference yesterday. The president has largely stood behind Bondi, but he has seemed to set her up to take the blame if this just doesn't go away. So how firm is his support of Bondi?
Well, he does say that he believes she's been doing a good job, and his support remains strong at this moment based on the different ways we've tried to assess that. You're right that he has certainly pushed the responsibility onto her shoulders at the Department of Justice. I had reporting today that she was due to attend this White House event for an issue that means a lot to her, dealing with fentanyl and increasing the penalties associated with fentanyl. In the end, I'm told that she had a schedule issue and was not able to attend. That may be what it is on its face, or perhaps she just wanted to stay out of the glare today.
Interesting that she was not at that event. Kelly O'Donnell live for us outside the White House. Kelly, thank you. I want to turn now to Ryan Nobles on the Hill. Ryan, Speaker Johnson appeared to call for the files to be released, though he's walking that back a bit. Are congressional Republicans in a tough position here, walking the line between appealing to their base versus maintaining their support for President Trump?
I wouldn't say all congressional Republicans are, Gabe, because there is a significant block of congressional Republicans that just want the files out there, regardless of what the White House wants right now. But Speaker Johnson is definitely in a tight spot. He very rarely ever tracks away from President Trump and his message. And he found himself in a position yesterday after this interview with Benny Johnson where they were saying two different things. He tried to clarify today to make the argument that they are on the same page. This is what he had to say.
I have been misquoted and misrepresented on all of that. Go watch the interview I did with Benny Johnson. I'm very clear. I mean, we're for transparency. I'm saying the same thing.
Outside of stanchions.
I mean, you need to have all of the credible information released for the American people to make their decision. We trust the American people, and I know the president does as well.
And so I think the distinction right now that the speaker's trying to make, that the president is trying to make, is this new kind of definition of what they call credible information. Credible, I think, in many ways is in the eyes of the beholder. Those who have been asking for these Epstein files to be released for some time just want everything out there and want the ability to decide for themselves what is credible. That's part of why these files haven't been released, because the Department of Justice doesn't just do that, just release a bunch of files that could then erroneously blame people for something that they're not guilty of. So this is the divide right now. And it's clear at this point that base isn't satisfied with what the White House is selling.
Well, Ryan, I asked Kelly if there could be any political consequences for the White House in all this, but on your beat, could there be political consequences in the midterms for some lawmakers running in MAGA-heavy districts who don't call for the release of these files?
I think at the very least, Gabe, it puts them in a very difficult position, right? Because there's no doubt that in these very distinctly red districts that President Trump's loyalty, the loyalty to President Trump is usually unwavering, and you don't ever want to be outside of a box that Donald Trump is in. But this Epstein controversy is its own animal. There are many people that came into the MAGA movement because of their concerns around the Epstein scandal. So it certainly complicates the issue. But what you're seeing many of these House Republicans in particular attempt to do is try and be both things, say that they still support the president. It's not a problem that they have with the president, but they are upset with the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, and the Department of Justice for not moving forward. I think that's the line you're going to see them continue to walk. And I think probably Republican leadership right now are just hoping that, like many of the MAGA world controversies, that this is something that goes away quickly, because oftentimes these scandals pop up and then they're gone quicker than they could even possibly run their course.
And Ryan, as we just heard from Hakeem Jeffries, Democrats are trying to seize on this. So why do you think that they think that this is a winning issue?
Well, because there's nothing like the enemy of your friend, the enemy of your enemy becoming your friend, I guess is a good way to put it. This is something that Democrats were not talking about 2 weeks ago. I cannot remember the last time a Democrat just randomly brought up the issue of Jeffrey Epstein. But the fact that it's created this fissure within the Republican Party opens up a line of attack for them. And it's now become something where almost every time they're talking about an issue, it's like subject, verb, Epstein, because they want this to continue to be an issue that is talked about in the political discourse. They understand how this undermines Trump's support with his most loyal group of followers. It's not necessarily that they're trying to win over the Epstein conspiracy theorists. What they want to do is encourage them to stay home because they're frustrated that the political process is letting them down once again.
And it's not often that they get to talk about so much division in the MAGA movement. Absolutely right. Ryan Noble is live for us on the Hill. Ryan, thank you. And as President Trump seeks to shift the focus from the Jeffrey Epstein files, he is ramping up his attacks once again on Fed Chair Jerome Powell. A senior White House official confirmed to NBC News that the president told a group of Republican lawmakers yesterday that he was likely going to fire Powell. Now, while the president continued his attacks today on the Fed chair, he pushed back on reports that he was preparing to fire the Fed chair.
No, we're not planning on doing anything. We're very concerned. He's doing a lousy job, but no, I'm not talking about that. Fortunately, we get to make a change in the next, 8 months or so. And we'll pick somebody that's good. I don't rule out anything, but I think it's highly unlikely, unless he has to leave for fraud.
Highly unlikely. Well, the president did confirm that he did bring up firing Powell in that meeting with lawmakers yesterday, and that they approved of the idea.
No, I talked about the concept of fire him. I said, what do you think? Almost every one of them said I should. But I'm more conservative than they are. But during the conversation, when we were talking about it, I asked, what would you do about that? They all said would fire him.
Well, joining me now is CNBC's economics editor, Jeff Cox. Jeff, thank you so much for being here. President Trump, as you just heard, said it's highly unlikely that he'll fire Jerome Powell after privately telling those lawmakers he probably would. What changed?
That's a great question, Gabe. I wish I had a great answer for you. I think we're all kind of in the same boat on this. Just to walk you through the timeline, shortly before noon today, we were able to confirm as well that meeting in the Oval Office yesterday where Trump spoke to Republican lawmakers, aired out this idea of getting rid of Powell, got a positive reception, said he was really thinking about doing it, and then we confirmed from a White House official that this could happen soon. So that happens, and then maybe 10 or 15 minutes later, the president appears in the White House and begins discussing this issue and says, no, we're not going to do that. So it's hard to really say where the president's thinking is on this. It seemed that this was a real possibility. Now he's saying it's not. What he might be saying tomorrow is completely different, but definitely a situation very much in flux, and the markets are a little on edge about it, obviously.
Yeah, tell me more about that. How did the markets react today to the back and forth?
Well, curiously enough, the markets really didn't react very much at all to it. We saw a little bit of a sell-off initially. Yields started to drift up a little bit as after the president's little meeting tete-a-tete ended, the markets turned back around. We ended up with a very strong close higher on Wall Street today, and Treasury yields down sharply. It almost feels like this taco trade idea with Trump Trump chickening out is now extending to the Fed situation. We've heard so many different vacillations about where the president really stands on this that it's just starting to sound like noise to the market, and they're sort of tuning it out.
Well, the president also suggested today that the Fed chair is either under investigation, could be under investigation for fraud. What type of fraud is he even talking about?
He's not talking about anything specifically. I guess if you read through the tea leaves on this expansion project obviously has gone way over budget. What some of his officials have talked about has been less about the dollar issue here and more about the way Powell has represented this project to Congress. Basically said that, kind of gone back and forth. This is included in the project. This isn't included in the project, kind of going back and forth. So I think that might be the avenue where they pursue, where there's some type of misrepresentation about the actual scope of the product, and then maybe digging down into the numbers of how that money is being spent and why it's being spent the way it's being spent and whether it's appropriate the way it's being spent.
Yeah, that project being the renovation of a government building, essentially. That may have been what the president was talking about. Jeff Cox from CNBC, we thank you very much. And coming up, Vice President J.D. Vance goes to bat for the president's so-called big, beautiful bill in battleground Pennsylvania. The vice president's message on new polls on where the public stands on Trump's sweeping domestic agenda. Plus, Israel strikes Syria's capital city as top U.S. officials push to de-escalate the newest outbreak of tensions in the Mideast. We'll have the latest on the conflict and the White House's response. You're watching Meet the Press now. Stay with us. Hey, welcome back. We've got more now on the president's frustrations with his base's focus on the Epstein files, as he told reporters in the Oval Office today that their attention should be on other issues.
I call it the Epstein hoax. It takes a lot of time and effort. Instead of talking about the great achievements we've had, I'd rather talk about the success we have with the economy, the best we've ever had, and all of the things we've done, including in the Middle East. I mean, you see it. Instead, they want to talk about the Epstein hoax.
But those other issues he sees as achievements aren't breaking through with voters yet, as new polling suggests a stagnant job approval for the president. Well, joining me now on set is the panel. Tamara Keith, White House correspondent for National Public Radio, and the catcher for the Bad News Babes press team. They will be on the field tonight against a team of bipartisan lawmakers in the Congressional Women's Softball game. And also with us, with no jersey, Cornell Belcher, Democratic pollster and NBC News political analyst, as well as Republican strategist, Mark Bednar. Thank you all so much for joining us. Tamara, I want to start with you. First of all, where can I get me one of those jerseys?
You have to be a woman, and I'm sorry you don't qualify. Fair. Or you could coach.
Oh, maybe I could. You would not want me as a coach. You would not do very well. But I do want to start with you. Talking to what the president just said there, can he really call this a Democratic hoax?
No, he can't, because it is not being driven by Democrats. However, Democrats are enjoying this, obviously, and they are trying to draw a lot of attention to the MAGA world strife. And they, I think, arguably do risk overplaying their hand and allowing him to turn it into a Democratic hoax. But right now, it is people that elected him. It is his base that has been so fixated on this and is let down and frustrated by the lack of transparency that they think they're seeing from this White House.
You know, this is the deepest fracture, is it not, so far that we've seen in MAGA world? I mean, there was a little bit earlier on by Elon Musk, a little bit, but nothing quite like this. But Mark, I want to play what some of Trump's fans on the outside are saying about all this and saying about the Epstein situation. Let's listen.
They got videotape, and all of a sudden they don't. You know, you have the director of the FBI on the show saying there's no if there was, nothing you're looking for is on those tapes. Like, what? Why did they say there was thousands of hours of tapes of people doing horrible? Why did they say that?
Right.
Didn't Pam Bondi say that?
It seems like you think your base is stupid. That's how I feel. I feel like Trump thinks his base is stupid, or, again, because I don't think he's pressing send on these messages, the people around him certainly think that Trump is stupid.
Can any other politician but Trump get away with telling some of his biggest supporters essentially take a hike? That's what he did this morning.
Well, what we've seen in a couple instances, and we're just 6 months into this administration, that there have been several perceived instances of strife or splits within the MAGA movement, within the party, whether it is the initial ICE engagements in Los Angeles or the Elon debacle or within One Big Beautiful Bill. Time after time after time, there's this perception of a rift. But then ultimately, this comes back to President Trump being the leader of our party. He's the most popular politician in the country. And like what he will end up saying with his guiding light in this situation, even if it gets a little bumpy, there's going to be some accommodation between disagreements here. And ultimately, I predict that the president is going to come out on top with all this.
Right, so it's pretty bumpy. I mean, how does he fix this? How long do you think this drags on for?
Well, there's a couple instances where everyone should take a deep breath. We've already seen with this memo, for instance, that the leadership of the DOJ and the FBI, that they've actually come to an agreement about what they've seen and what there is and what there isn't in terms of remaining evidence or remaining information. So it's going to be incumbent upon them to reach out with the potential skeptics to say, look, here's what we know. Here's what we don't know. Here's what we have revealed. Here's what we originally thought, but did not turn out to be the case. But you can be honest and transparent about that. But that is more tactical, and that's just going to take a matter of time.
Speaking of tactics, Cornell, is it worth it for the Democrats to get involved here? Should they get down in the mud?
Well, no, I don't think Democrats will get involved here, but I also not surprised that the chickens are coming home to roost.
Right. Well, they are, though. I mean, Hakeem Jeffries is basically coming out and arguing that, it means that Republicans lied before or that they're covering it up now. They could just let this go, but they're attacking here.
I think one or two statements is not getting into like this is not something Democrats from week to week will be talking about. They'll be talking about this about the bill. One thing I don't know what measurement we're using to measure most popularity, but I'm gonna let that slide. But look, the chickens are coming home to roost. He's built his political fortune off of lies, from the lie he told when he first came down and said Mexicans were rapists and gang members to the lie he told about the guy I used to work about not being a U.S. citizen. So I'm not at all surprised by at some point this is going to bite you. And I agree. In the long run, will his base leave him for this? No, but it's not about that. For the long run, we're looking at a midterm. And midterms are determined by a lot about sort of energy and whose base turns out. And Republicans have had an advantage on always having their base energized. And they're older, they're more conservative, they're more likely voters. If they go into a midterm where history says they're going to have a tough time, plus their base is not energized, it becomes really problematic.
To that point, talking about the midterms, I want to put up some interesting reporting from Politico. Politico says that interviews with a dozen Democratic elected officials, strategists, and aides cast the controversy as helpful, not only in dividing Trump's base, but also illustrating the president's flip-flopping tendencies, even on his core campaign issues. Tamara, could there be a political impact here in 2026?
I think that what Cornell talks about in terms of the energy of the base, the reality of the Republican base is that President Trump expanded it. He expanded it into voters that used to vote Democratic or used to not vote at all, including a lot of young men. The people that he expanded his base to are the ones who often have cared the most about this story, about this Epstein thing. So if he turns them off, it doesn't take much to not vote in a midterm. So that could be an implication. Also, though, I do have to remind all of us that basically every week there's a new thing that's consuming everything. Yes. And like 3 weeks ago, we were talking about Iran and whether his base was going to stick with him on the bombing in Iran.
Oh my God.
And I think it really was only about 3 weeks ago.
3 weeks? Yeah, it feels like at least 3 months ago, right?
Right.
But anyway, well, Cornell, I want to switch to something we talked about earlier in the program. Vice President Vance, he's hitting the road to sell the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill. New CNN poll numbers, though, show that more than 60% of respondents are opposed to the package. What's your take on that right now? Is that a better line of attack?
Yes, it's a much better line of attack, and that's the line of attack I think you'll see going into the midterms. That's the line of attack that you'll see the D-TRIP and the DS and all the independent expenditures spending millions of dollars on, and quite frankly, that's the line of attack that we know resonates with the voters in the middle of the road. He's going to Pennsylvania today right now, and what's Democrats in Pennsylvania pointing out? They're pointing out that close to 500,000 Pennsylvanians are at risk for losing their health care because of this bill. That is more salient sort of a conversation for middle of the road voters, and to your point, to get those voters angry or energized about turning out in a midterm, more so than the Epstein situation.
Yeah. Well, Mark, they always say that if you're explaining, you're losing. Is that what's happening here with Republicans?
Well, one thing we can all agree on is that the one big beautiful bill is going to be way more salient of a midterm issue than anything related to Epstein. A couple things with the poll regarding CNN, however, is I would point out they just polled respondents. They did not. They polled American adults, who have not even registered likely voters. So to look at that and to read the tea leaves as how it's going to actually impact the midterms, that would be very unclear, just based on the respondents alone. But secondly, if Republicans assume the terminology and the way that the phraseology of the questions, then yes, winning is going to be tougher by just talking about things about explaining with no explanation about what's happening with healthcare, what's happening with EV battery issues and whatnot. Then that's trickier. But if they talk about the merits of work requirements, which has been a long time bipartisan win, or if they talk about how the average price of a new electric vehicle is $56,000, and should taxpayers actually be subsidizing people to be paying for those? Like, when you get down to the substance, like, the facts are on our side.
Tamara, really quickly, Trump's overall approval rating is largely higher than it is on any individual issue. Yeah. How do you explain that?
Yeah, it's fascinating. His numbers are, his strength used to be immigration. Those numbers are down. His strength used to be the economy. Those numbers are down. But he still has his base, and it is rock solid. And that's how you continue to maintain that overall approval.
All right, Cornell, Mark, Tamara, thank you so much for joining me here on the panel, and good luck on the game today.
Beat Congress, beat cancer.
Thanks so much for joining us. All right, and a reminder here we go. A reminder that all proceeds, from tonight's game will benefit the Young Survival Coalition. That's an organization dedicated to helping young women fight breast cancer. As you mentioned, you can buy tickets and attend the game in Washington or donate directly to the cause at the websites on your screen right now. Glad we got that in. And up next, one bill, two strategies. My interviews with a House Republican and a House Democrat on how each party is seizing on President Trump's domestic agenda in the run-up to the midterms. You're watching Meet the Press now. Stay with us. Welcome back. As we mentioned, Vice President J.D. Vance is on the road in Pennsylvania, selling the sweeping domestic policy package signed into law by President Trump last week. It could have a major impact on the midterm elections, and at least for now, it looks like Republicans have some messaging work to do. A new CNN poll out today had more than 60% of respondents opposing the package, which extends the 2017 Trump tax cuts but slashes spending from the social safety net. And joining me now is New York Republican Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us here on Meet the Press Now.
Thank you.
So, Congresswoman, Vice President Vance is on the road today selling that so-called one big beautiful bill. Now, this does come as a new CNN poll has a majority of respondents opposing the bill. So public opinion on the legislation could be vital in next year's elections. How do Republicans sell it?
Well, I think as people see the benefits kicking in, they will certainly support the bill. I mean, at the end of the day, when they do their taxes next year, working Americans, middle-class families, senior citizens are going to see significant savings as a result of the provisions that we put in. Not only doubling, but increasing the child tax credit and the standard deduction, making sure that the income tax brackets stay low, making sure that we restore the SALT, state and local tax deduction for people I represent. That is critical for middle-class families. And then the savings that they're going to see, senior citizens, tipped workers, those who work overtime. I think when they see that, they will benefit. They'll also see, by the way, that many of the claims made by the Democrats regarding Medicaid are just simply not true. What we've done is make sure that the program is preserved for seniors, for the disabled, for children, for pregnant women, for those who live beneath the poverty line. We put in place provisions to ensure that ineligible fraudsters and illegal immigrants don't benefit from those dollars. And then we put in place reasonable work requirements, part-time work requirements to either work, volunteer, or to learn for people who are young and mentally and physically able to do so, which 90%, by the way, of the population on Medicaid already work. So they'll see that a lot of the things that the claims made by the opposite side are simply not true. Plus the economic benefit.
You and other Republicans are focusing on the tax cuts. You're also downplaying the changes to the social safety net, at least what critics have focused on. But Missouri Republican Senator Josh Hawley is out with new legislation to undo some of the Medicaid changes in this newly passed law. Is that something that you would support?
Look, I think we struck the right balance here. And as I said, we protect the most vulnerable who the Medicaid program was intended for by rooting out the waste, fraud, and abuse. That's something that the American people actually do support. And they'll see that. They will see in time that what people have claimed about this bill is simply not true, and that the program will be preserved and strengthened as a result of the actions we have taken here. I would actually, I haven't seen Mr. Hawley's bill. I certainly would take a look at it to see the changes. But for New York, for example, we preserved fully the 50% match that New York receives for traditional Medicaid and the 90% match that they receive for the expansion Medicaid. That is significant. That was one of the biggest things that I fought to make sure that there were no cuts that would be detrimental.
But does this all mean that there will be some of your constituents who lose coverage? Do you consider them to be abusing the program? And when it comes to work requirements, how do you enforce that? Doesn't that create its own bureaucracy?
Well, again, we already know that 90% of the people on Medicaid already do work, so I'm not sure that making sure that the other 10% that could be eligible work is really going to be a problem here. What I would say, again, is that we had to take necessary measures. If anybody does a Google search and they look up Medicaid fraud in New York State, they will see example after example after example of the type of fraud that is within the system. About a week ago, the Attorney General issued indictments for transportation companies that were defrauding the taxpayers once again through Medicaid. And so this is something that the governor, the Attorney General, and the state controller have said is a rampant problem. Of course, they want to politicize the bill now to score points. But at the end of the day, people will see that the changes that we made were very reasonable. And that the most vulnerable groups that I just laid out earlier, the seniors and the disabled and the others, they don't have to adhere to those work requirements. We're talking simply about able-bodied, mentally capable, people of working age, and it's part-time. So many Americans work diligently to receive their health care. Why wouldn't people on Medicaid do the same?
Well, Congresswoman, I do want to switch topics. There's a lot going on today. You know, President Trump and his allies, there's been a lot of talk about whether the president would remove the Fed Chair. Jerome Powell today, he said that was unlikely, but he hasn't ruled it out. But Senator Tillis, for example, has said that firing the Fed Chair would destroy the U.S.'s reputation as a safe haven for financial services. Are you comfortable with the president removing Jay Powell?
I do believe that we should see a change at the Federal Reserve. I'll be honest with you. When these rate increases went into effect, it was because we had very high inflation, upwards of 9% under President Joe Biden. That inflation has now come down significantly. Wow. It has dropped significantly under President Trump. And so these rates need to come down as well. We are paying a tremendous amount of money. It's costing the taxpayers tremendous amount of money in interest because of these higher rates, the mortgage rates also. Everything is costing Americans more because these rates have not come down as inflation has come down.
Well, to be clear, the president has said that he does want Jerome Powell gone when his term is up next year, but he says he has no plans to fire him. Are you saying that the president should fire Jerome Powell now?
I think, look, I trust the president to make what he thinks is the best decision. I would like to see a change, quite frankly. If we need to wait until next year, that's okay, I guess. However,
can the president do that, though? Can the president do that? Do you believe that the president can remove him?
I think the president does have the ability to remove him, yes. Now, I trust the president to make that decision on what he thinks is best. But what I will say is, if we do not lower the interest rates, which Jerome Powell seems not inclined to do for some reason, even though inflation has come down from the 9% it was under Joe Biden to where it is today, roughly, 2% or so, we are not going to see savings for the American people in terms of loan rates, mortgage rates, interest rates, and of course, some of the other things that have been plaguing us, like the amount of debt that we have to pay because of these high interest rates.
And Congresswoman, on another topic that's getting a lot of attention today, House Speaker Mike Johnson, yesterday he said that he wants to see transparency from this White House over the Jeffery Epstein files. Do you agree with him?
I do agree with the Speaker. I think, look, we always should err on the side of transparency. And quite frankly, we've been pushing for transparency in all sorts of different measures. Why should this be any different? And so I think transparency is always a good thing.
But in a post today and in the Oval Office today, the president called the situation involving the Epstein files a scam and a hoax. Do you agree with the president?
Well, look, I think that maybe there is much being said about nothing here, but the way to find out is whether there is some type of release of information, and hopefully we'll see a little more transparency.
Congresswoman Malliotakis, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And now for the view from the other side of the aisle. I'm joined now by Democrat from Washington, Congresswoman Kim Schrier. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us here on Meet the Press Now.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So even with public opinion on your side, how do you make sure that the Democratic Party has a clear message about the president's domestic agenda bill, especially when some provisions like the Medicaid work requirement won't even go into effect until after the midterms?
Well, I just listened to my colleague, and, the expression is when you're explaining, you're losing. And what I just heard was a whole bunch of spin. I will tell you the message has already gotten out to my district. I've been doing so many town halls, and the biggest questions I get are what is happening with Medicaid, what is happening with food stamps, and they understand that this administration and a very obedient Republican Congress is taking food benefits and health care away from the neediest in this country and transferring those savings to a gigantic tax cut for the wealthiest people in this country. The American people understand it, and they're about to see their insurance rates go up. They're going to see long waits in the emergency department, and we're going to see 1 out of 4 rural hospitals close because of this ugly bill.
And Congresswoman, will Democrats only message against this legislation that was passed, or will you also try to work with some across the aisle to try and undo some of the provisions? For example, would you support Senator Hawley's legislation to undo some of the Medicaid cuts?
Well, I will tell you that I will fight for whatever benefits my district, and reversing some of these very dangerous, very hurtful cuts is the right thing to do for my district. In fact, in our subcommittee hearing today, I saw my Republican colleagues bring up a bill to protect rural hospitals, to increase the pipeline, to get more physicians in rural areas, to help with underserved populations. They know this was a bad bill, and they are now trying to fix it. And of course, I will join them in trying to fix this, because that is the right thing to do for the people I represent.
So wait, so to be clear, you would or you would not support Hawley's bill?
Well, I'm in the House, he's in the Senate, but I will support legislation that would remove these draconian cuts to Medicaid. I also want to be really clear that my colleague, she said the quiet part out loud. Well north of 90% of people who are able-bodied and can work are working. And what we have seen in other states, in states that have tried this exact technique, is that people who do qualify, who are working, who are taking care of dependents, who meet exemptions, they're getting kicked off of Medicaid simply because of paperwork errors or paperwork delays. And that is why these numbers that we are hearing is that 17 million Americans are going to lose health coverage. And in my state of Washington, hundreds of thousands, it adds up to about half the population of Seattle, is going to lose their health care coverage.
And Congresswoman, Republican strategists have been advising lawmakers to rebrand the legislation, to focus on the tax cuts. So let me play some of what the vice president said today while he was in Pennsylvania.
We worked so hard to get this legislation passed, to cut your taxes, to prevent big tax increases, to make it easier to save and invest right here in this great country that all of us love. Would you believe that the Democrats, they are attacking us every single day? And you know what their big line of attack is? Their big line of attack is that Donald Trump dares to put tariffs on foreign countries who try to bring their crap into the United States of America. And that's interesting to me, because Democrats seem to like everything that increases taxes.
Congresswoman, how do you compete with that messaging that this legislation is good for people's pocketbooks and that Democrats just want to raise taxes?
Oh my gosh, it is so easy to compete with that messaging because the American people already know, they understand, they've seen this bill, that it takes away their health care, it takes away their food in order to give the biggest tax breaks. I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars of tax breaks to individual billionaires in this country. This is a bad deal for the people I represent. I do not represent billionaires. So the American people are smarter than this. That's why they are packing my town halls. And frankly, it's why Republicans are being told not to hold town halls, because they don't want to take the heat.
Congresswoman, let me ask you about another topic, about Health Secretary RFK Jr. Last month, you confronted him during a hearing saying you will, quote, lay all the responsibility for every death from a vaccine preventable illness at Secretary Kennedy's feet. So what does that look like? What can you actually do to hold Secretary Kennedy accountable while you're still in the minority?
Well, look, oversight is one of the jobs of Congress. And I want to be clear that RFK Jr. has no business being our Secretary of Health and Human Service. He peddles in conspiracy theories. He has been in the anti-vax circles for dozens of years. And frankly, the reason I can lay responsibility at his feet is that he spent the past 20 plus years telling parents that they should be more afraid of vaccines than they should be of the diseases that they prevent. And vaccines are safe and effective, and I'm a pediatrician, and I have these conversations and answer questions of nervous parents all the time, and I feel tremendous empathy for them, because now RFK Jr. has brought fringe medical theories into the administration and is using that platform to scare parents and to jeopardize public health. So we will do oversight, and I will be very outspoken in making sure that the American people understand that vaccines are safe and effective and that they prevent terrible suffering and death, particularly in children.
So two questions. You're a pediatrician. How do you combat vaccine misinformation? And then separately, if the Democrats do retake the House, would you impeach Kennedy?
Well, let me just say that the way that I can get information out there is talking with people like you. And that video of me taking on RFK Jr. has gone pretty viral and has gotten a lot of really positive response, because people are hungering to hear truth. And I think they're hungering to hear like a real, genuine, face-to-face message from somebody who they can trust. And most often that is their pediatrician. So I'm going to try to be the pediatrician for the country and reassure parents and answer their very understandable questions.
And quickly, would you impeach Kennedy if Democrats retake the House?
That's a theoretical question, but I'll tell you that I can't say no to that. He is really harmful, and I'm hoping he resigns before that even becomes an issue.
Thank you, Congresswoman Schrier. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And after the break, the White House's push for de-escalation after Israel's decision to launch airstrikes on Damascus. We're live in Tel Aviv. You're watching Meet the Press now. And welcome back. The White House is expressing confidence that tensions are easing in Syria after the Israeli military launched a series of airstrikes on the capital city of Damascus earlier today. The targets included the country's defense ministry. That moment captured on live television.
قال وزير الدفاع الاحتلال الإسرائيلي إسرائيل كاتس إن الجيش سيواصل مهاجمة قوات.
Remarkable video there. Second strike on the defense ministry also aired on live TV. Wow. It comes as Syria's government announced a ceasefire today with militias affiliated with a religious minority after days of fighting in southern Syria. Joining us now is NBC News International correspondent Matt Bradley. He's in Tel Aviv. Matt, Secretary of State Marco Rubio commented on the situation just a short time ago. What did he say?
Yeah, well, he tweeted out that we have engaged all the parties involved for the clashes in Syria. We have agreed on specific steps that will bring this troubling and horrifying situation to an end tonight. Now, this comes after we heard from the Syrian government, as you mentioned, that there was going to be a ceasefire. We also heard that from one of the Druze leaders in Sweda, which is where a lot of the Druze in southwestern Syria are concentrated. And he said that there was going to be a ceasefire as well. But we also heard from one of his rival Druze leaders within that same community who said that there isn't a ceasefire, that he's determined to fight until the Syrian regime is expelled from Sweda, expelled from southwestern Syria. So it's unclear whether or not this ceasefire, as it's being called, by Marco Rubio, by these Druze leaders, by the Syrian government, whether or not this is going to stand without all of the Druze factions totally in line.
You know, Matt, explain this for our viewers. Just how did this situation in Syria intensify so quickly in the last few days?
Well, we've been seeing this actually over the past couple of weeks, sort of intensifying Bedouin harassment of the Druze minority in southwestern Syria. It culminated just before the weekend when we saw, over the weekend, when we saw that there was a Bedouin attack that badly injured a young Druze man around that area in Sweda. This created back and forth reprisals. The military from the regime in Damascus was sent in by Ahmed al-Shara, the leader of Syria now, after he overthrew Bashar al-Assad late last year, to try to subdue, to try to calm this conflict. The Israelis and some of the Druze factions saw that as an attack on the Druze. The Israelis started firing at the regime forces in southwest Syria. And that's where we are now, escalating all the way to Syria's capital in Damascus, where the Israelis are now attacking military installations, even striking near the presidential palace.
Did you get the sense today that the U.S. may have been a little annoyed here?
That's a good question, because the fact of the matter is that this does buck up against one of the major initiatives by the Trump administration in the Middle East. Donald Trump has tried and reinvigorate the leader of Syria.
Matt Bradley, live for us in Tel Aviv. Matt, thank you. And up next, we will have the results from yesterday's special election, the Democratic primary in Arizona, and what it says about the future of the Democratic Party. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. If it's Wednesday, we have election results. Arizona Democrat Adelita Grijalva won a special election primary for the House seat that was held by her late father for more than 20 years. Grijalva, who had the backing of top Arizona Democrats and progressive heavyweights like Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, beat activist and social media influencer Deja Fox by more than 40 points. NBC's Vaughn Hilliard has the latest from Arizona.
All of that is right. These results say so much, and chief among them is that in the case of Deja Fox, 25 years old, she leaned into her age and her social media presence, and it's clear that the voters here in southern Arizona said that that was not good enough to ultimately earn a vote over somebody who had deep, deep roots in this community, had served them in public office for more than 20 years, and whose family was very much of a known entity. This is for Adelita Grijalva, who pulled off that massive victory last night. This was a message that here in the greater Tucson area across southern Arizona, that her father, Raul Grijalva, who in conversation with her yesterday, she made clear to me that he won 11 terms in a row for a reason, and that was because he was a proven progressive who is willing to go and fight in Washington, D.C. on behalf of the people of this greater community. And ultimately, it was that message that rang through. Deja Fox would have been the youngest woman ever to serve in Congress, the second Gen Z candidate. She had amassed a massive social media following, but ultimately that national recognition was not enough to sway voters in this community that she should go serve them in Washington, D.C. And undoubtedly, there's a lot of attention, we should be clear, on this race because of Deja Fox and her social media presence. And she was a reproductive rights advocate, and she made clear that she was able to reach a mass of people to get her message out. But ultimately here in the year of 2025, that may not be good enough, right? Zoran Mamdani, who was 33 years old, he really rose through social media in New York City. But there were folks last night to me at the Adelita Grijalva Watch Victory Party who were saying to me, look, Zoran Mamdani is different. He was a fixture in his community for a long time. He was serving in the state assembly, and that his case does not apply necessarily to this one. So I think that these results last night will send a message that still that grassroots organizing and deep experience in history really do mean something in our politics today still.
And thanks, Devon, for that report. Thank you for watching. I'm Gabe Gutierrez. We're back tomorrow with more Meet the Press Now. The news continues with Hallie Jackson.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.